What we believe through the perceptual data that we help you collect at CE is, I think there's really 5 things that matter. 1 on the staff side, 4 on the student side. On the staff side, we call it the I versus they gap. So how committed are you to me? So if you and I are both 4th grade teachers, what we see in education is I have a real high perception of my own efficacy as an educator. I don't have quite the same perception around what it is you're doing. Oftentimes unfamiliarity is sort of what masks that. But, can we tighten up that I versus they gaps?
How often do you think about the culture of your school or district? Is it something you actively shape, or does it feel more like a background element that just happens? What if I told you that culture might be the secret ingredient to transforming education? Well, in today's episode, we're diving deep into the impact of school culture and leadership on educational success. We'll explore what makes Outlier schools stand out, the importance of servant leadership at every level, and the role of data in driving meaningful change. Whether you're an educator, administrator, or just passionate about improving education, today's conversation will provide valuable insight on how to foster a thriving school environment. Our guest today is Eric Bolz, a seasoned educator with 25 years of experience in public education. Eric is now at the Center for Educational Effectiveness, where he focuses on research and district engagement, helping schools across the nation improve their practices. He's also the host of the Outliers podcast, where he delves into what makes certain schools exceptional. I had the pleasure of being a guest on his podcast, and I'm thrilled to have him on Shifting Schools today to return the favor. Before we jump into the interview, I want to invite you to Camp Shifting Schools. Camp Shifting Schools is a space Tricia and I have created to collaborate, share, and learn from one another through meaningful engagement and conversation. It's also where you'll find our courses like Leading in the Era of AI, which you get for free when you join. It's a private network exclusive to the Shifting Schools community, and we would love it if you joined us there. Head over to shiftingschools.com and click on Learn with Us, or go directly to camp.shiftingschools.com. I hope to see you there. Shifting Schools is excited to be sponsored by newlight.io. Their platform is designed to simplify MTSS frameworks for personalized student support. Built by leading experts, Newlight focuses on getting educators the answers they need fast. Which students need which levels of support? With simple data collection and insightful analytics powered by AI, Newlight's platform provides actionable solutions to support your students effectively. Try it for free at newlight.io. That's newlight.io. Check the link in the show notes to learn more. Hey folks, FETC, that's the Future of Education Technology Conference, is just around the corner, happening January 14th through 17th, 2025 in Orlando. It's your chance to be part of the first and best EdTech event of the year. As a special offer, just for the Shifting Schools community, you can use promo code SHIFTING10 at checkout for an extra 10% off an all access or session passes. Head to fetc.org to register today, save, and get ready to bring the future of education into your school. That's Shifting10, all caps, Shifting10 at fetc.org for an additional 10% off. Offer ends December 13th. All right, I'm excited to share this conversation with Eric Bolz from the Center for Educational Effectiveness and the host of the Outliers podcast, talking about what creates outlier schools. And with that, on with the show. All right, welcome back to the Shifting Schools podcast. Excited today to get to return the favor with Eric Bolz, who is research and district engagement at the Center for Educational Effectiveness. Also has a podcast called Outliers, which I was a guest on. And Eric, honored to be a guest on your podcast. Returning the favor here as we do a little podcast swapping in the world of podcasts. And excited to have you here today to talk about effective educational transformation. And I'm excited to have you here. Eric, welcome to the show. Give us a little bit about your background as we get started today.
Well, hey, thanks so much. And thank you for the shout out for the Outliers podcast. We really enjoyed having you on as a guest. And I think we strive to have folks that really push the envelope in terms of thinking around education. And you could not have hit that mark better. So, just a thank you for that first. A little bit about me, 25 years in public education, retired a little bit by accident, June of 2020, which means I only did 117 days in the COVID space. I was a assistant superintendent for what passes for a large school district in Washington State, Pasco School District in southeastern Washington. And toward the end of my tenure, really felt like I hit on some things that made a big difference in school transformation, which is what led to this particular job at the Center for Educational Effectiveness. And that pretty much catches you up, brings us to where we are today.
Here we are today. Well, let's get started with talk a little bit about what does the Center for Educational Effectiveness do? Kind of what is your mission? What's your mission there?
So I think what we do more than anything else for people who are a certain age, you might remember those BASF commercials. We don't make schools. We just make what schools do better. So we really work in that survey, research, and evaluation space, looking to help you find customized solutions to do work that's unique. And we know a fair amount about what it looks like to function uniquely at an outlier level in education because of some of our research pieces.
And that's kind of where I want to dig into today. And I'll make sure to link to it in the show notes. But over on your website, Center for Educational Effectiveness, you guys have done some research, great research over there around what creates outlier schools. Can you talk a little bit about what did the research find that outlier schools really have in common that really is the centerpiece of where you guys focus?
Absolutely. And without delving too deep into the methodology, because I wouldn't want to put people to sleep when they're consuming this podcast, what we found in a nutshell was commitment to each other, I would say at every level of constituency. So really a meticulous curation, maintenance, and improvement of culture amongst staff, student, families, and communities. When we saw those things in common, we saw a number of other things as well, but when we saw those things in common, that almost unconditional positive regard across and within and between constituencies, we saw schools that were doing remarkable work.
So talk about that a little bit. So what we're really talking about here is like school climate and school culture. Where does that start? Did you find, do we start with leadership? And is this like culture that is set forth by school boards and leadership? Is this something that we grow within PLCs is a big thing right now? Is that where we're seeing some of this culture come out of? Or is it all of the above?
I was going to say, I think the answers to your questions are in a nutshell are yes. But we did see a fair amount of commonality across the conditions. We saw teachers that were in their positions longer than what you would expect in terms of typical teacher tenure. In most of our schools, we saw principals who had been in those roles 5 years or more, lots of times scratching underneath the perceptual data, or at least the perceptual feedback inside of like semi-structured interview scenarios. Pretty positive regard for what happened at the central office in many of these schools. So just a real tight alignment in terms of mission. I think living that mission and serving kids best. I'd say tight alignment inside of the constituency.
Very, very cool. So let's unpack that just a little bit. How do you create this culture, or what is it that you found? Are there pillars that you found within the research that showed that this is how you kind of set forth culture, or these are pillars that every outlier school seems to have in common?
Yeah, I think in a nutshell, whether they call it servant leadership or not, what you see at all levels of healthy schools is servant leadership. And I think one of the big hallmarks of servant leadership is I know who exactly my primary constituency is. If I work at the central office as an assistant superintendent, I'm very clear that my constituents are principals. I do what I can to enable and support great principal practice. Principals in turn support teachers, teachers support children. And as opposed to being convoluted about, where our mission might be, we say we're all here for the kids, but I would push back on that a little bit and say, really? Are we? As an assistant superintendent in an office someplace, am I doing anything that really made a difference for the 20,000 kids in Pasco through my service? Or did I have the ability to change conditions inside of principal practice so that they could in turn support their teachers the same way? And then ultimately you see much better results, both whole child wise and academic achievement results wise with students. So I think it's being mission clear about who you serve. And my belief is we serve whoever is downstream. We don't
Mm.
serve upstream. And that can get you in a little political trouble. Those are different stories for different days. But in my tenure in the central office, which is where I spent the bulk of my career, I was always very clear that I was in service to principals. And I think you see that same sentiment just pervading these outlier schools in Washington State.
Educators, are you searching for a new space to connect, collaborate, and grow? Well, Camp Shifting Schools is your new home. With the decline of X, formerly Twitter, we're here to offer a safe, welcoming community where you can join other passionate teachers. Take part in free courses, webinars, and live AMA sessions to evaluate your practice. Ready to join the conversation? Head over to camp.shiftingschools.com and become part of the camp community today. Learning and connecting awaits. When we talk about leadership coaching in some of the key components of leadership coaching programs, which is some of the work that you do over there at the Center for Educational Effectiveness, what are some of the key things that you do around the idea of leadership coaching?
Well, we do a couple things. We're big believers in the work out of Gonzaga University, professors Chuck Salina and Suzanne Gertz and their Powerless to Powerful framework. So really helping people understand that there's great research inside of this notion around servant leadership, that change is not necessarily what we've heard from some other researchers, that it can only happen in over 3 to 5 years. When you galvanize people around the mission and serve them well, you can expect to see change inside of a 45-day iterative PDSA cycle. So we're really grounded in that piece. We're also grounded in looking at data a little differently. I would say since the inception of No Child Left Behind, and in Washington State, where I am, prior to No Child Left Behind, we really became beholden to these high-stakes summative assessments. So we'd look at academic data on the year, really lagging data, almost an autopsy, if you will, write goals around that autopsy, compare apples and oranges, of course, sort of cross-cohort data, implement something that generally looked like an activity and wonder why that didn't work, which is what we're seeing across the United States. This policy-driven approach to improvement in the United States, really starting with No Child Left Behind and continuing in policy today, hasn't had much of an impact. We've poured a lot of money into it. So what we believe is that you really need to look at 4 data sets, and they're not all equal. You start on the demographic side so you know who you serve. You need to look carefully at perceptual data, which is really the bread and butter of our work at CEE. You need to know deeply who you serve and what those folks are thinking. Then you tweak your context. We call that different things, RTI, MTSS. But based on those first 2 data sets, when you tweak your contextual data, which is changing your systems and structures and supports inside of schools, then ultimately you see some pretty good results around both, whole child health and academic achievement. But recognizing first that academic achievement is a lagging indicator. It's the last good thing that happens in a system, not the first. And I think we've really focused on that in sort of a bass-backwards way by policy.
I love that. There's all this talk right now about closing the achievement gap, especially coming out of COVID. We've got, the loss of learning now, which is just another way to say achievement gap in my world. We've got this idea. So what strategies does the CEE recommend for schools and districts in narrowing that achievement gap? Or how have you seen this approach support schools in actually doing that? Because I agree with you. We say words like achievement gap or learning loss. And we instantly go to, okay, what structures can we put in place without really taking a deeper look of what's the whole system that has to change in order to make that happen?
First of all, I think you're exactly right. And it's easy to point to a structure. This year, we're implementing MTSS.
Yeah.
This year, we're redoubling our GLAD and PSYOP training. And those approaches, I gave the longer version last time, but those approaches, if they would have worked by now, would have worked well before 25 years in by policy, right? So. Yeah. What we believe through the perceptual data that we help you collect at CEE is, I think there's really 5 things that matter. 1 on the staff side, 4 on the student side. On the staff side, we call it the I versus they gap. So how committed are you to me? So if you and I are both 4th grade teachers, what we see in education is I have a real high perception of my own efficacy as an educator. I don't have quite the same perception around what it is you're doing. Oftentimes unfamiliarity is sort of what masks that. But, can we tighten up that I versus they gap? So I'm mission clear, and I believe that the majority of my colleagues are mission clear. So I think focusing on that piece, because we believe you can measure culture, because you actually can, and improving that culture with the staff makes a difference. And then on the student side, I think there are 4 basic questions that everybody should be asking. And if you were seeing better outcomes with students around these 4 questions, you'd ultimately see better achievement. One is, in this school, there's at least one adult who knows and cares about me. The next one, in this school, I feel like I belong to a group of friends. I'm good at staying focused on my goals, and I enjoy coming to school, which is the ultimate proxy for attendance. I think kids that hit 4 for 4 there are achieving well by and large, and institutionally, we can't necessarily hurt them. So the question inside of my mind is how much unconditional belief in each other do the staff have? And are we moving students to being able to report 4 for 4 in terms of that perceptual data? I think it's almost as simple. It sounds simple. It's obviously complex to implement.
Sure.
It's complex to make you have confidence in my efficacy as an instructor, as a co-instructor. But if we're mindful of these 5 things and we're aligning our improvement efforts to staff efficacy and student well-being, achievement will take care of itself. If we're committed to each other doing the best work, we don't have to have the best methods. If we have the best methods and we lack commitment, we may as well not waste the time or the money.
Talk a little bit about the big picture that the Center for Educational Effectiveness does. You're based here in Washington. Is it only Washington, or is this a national program?
We provide supports to national clients. Our largest clients, Gwinnett County Public Schools in Georgia.
Okay.
I think they're the 11th largest school district in the United States, 180,000 students, also one of the most ethnically diverse. I've been there for a week. It's fascinating to be inside of a school system the size of, up here, we would say Seattle's big. It's 4 Seattles and change.
Yeah.
I worked in Pasco School District with 20,000 students. So it's the size of 9 Pascos. I felt like Pasco was an immense organization to work inside of. So we work with folks like that. We work predominantly in Washington State, however, with about 80 plus clients inside of Washington State. But you can access our services, our platforms, and our support from wherever you are in the country.
Very, very cool. Hi, folks. We'll get back to our conversation in just a moment. I want to talk a bit more about newlight.io, the AI FERPA compliant, that's our federal guidelines around privacy of student data, platform making personalized student support a breeze. Student privacy is huge in our schools, and New Light is big on privacy as well. It was one of the first questions I asked the co-founder, Jose, about. There are a few AI systems out there that meet the requirements to being FERPA compliant, and New Light does just that. New Light's IntelliTier platform is more than just a data collection tool. It's an AI-powered assistant that has been trained to truly understand the MTSS framework, student context, and school-specific resources. Developed by a team with both social, emotional, and behavioral needs in mind, and with plans to extend into academic support soon. Studies show effective MTSS and SEL implementations can boost attendance, improve grades, and increase graduation rates. Yet many schools struggle with the complexities of gathering data and turning that data into actionable items within the MTSS process. New Light's IntelliTier platform makes it easy with simple, fast data collection, asynchronous collaboration across the MTSS team, and actionable insight that educators can implement and document their success with. Plus, New Light is advised by seasoned educators and administrators, so they understand your everyday classroom challenges. You have to try it out for yourself. So head over to newlight.io to give it a try for free. That's NEULIGHT.io. Thank you to New Light for taking this on, and a proud sponsor of the Shifting Schools community. As we get ready to wrap this up, is there anything else you want to talk about that the Center for Educational Effectiveness does, or something that you guys are really focused in on as we start another school year here?
I think over the next school year, what we're finding is our surveys have changed very little over 25 years. If anything, they've gotten slightly less, I would say, complex and convoluted, although we still give you way too much data. I say the good news about us is we give you way too much data. The bad news about us is we give you way too much data. So my role, I think, is to really help folks cut through that noise. And what are those 4 or 5 things that I mentioned earlier that you can think about? So we'll continue to bring our mission to the world of relationships matter, school culture matters. Those things should be reflected inside of your district strategic plans and building improvement plans. And I know of no other organization, whether it's on the research side or on the survey to application side, that helps better. I still consider myself an educational practitioner. I found an accidental path into this wonderful organization, so I really just come as a practitioner evangelist for these tools that I know that work.
If there is a school leader that is listening to this and they're saying, you know what, that sounds like some work that we could be using or leveraging in our district, what does that process look to onboard a district? Or if a district leader reaches out to you, kind of what does that look like from your end and their end as far as
So from
creating this
our end, I think
partnership?
the easiest way to get to us is just to go out to our website at effectiveness.org, fill out the form, send us an email. We'll reach out to you. We don't believe in one size fits all solutions. So generally that's a conversation around, tell me about your current reality from your perspective, Jeff. What types of issues are you looking to solve? Are you looking for support with? And then really matching your issues to our proven solution sets. So pretty organic process, as opposed to, I think what you see in some of our larger national competitors is, well, we have a survey platform. We ask these questions. We kick you the data back. We'll be back to measure it next year. You really get a partner with us, somebody who can help you implement boots on the ground versus you're buying a product in a transactional approach.
Are you guys seeing anything? And I know this is kind of a question out of the blue, and maybe you're not, and feel free to say you're not seeing this, but I know one of the things, as I've been traveling, the month of August doing keynotes, especially around the state of Washington, but other places, is this idea of, I think all of this idea of just, school climate, school culture. And we find ourselves in a teacher gap almost, in that we are not getting new teachers into the system at the same rate we were. We're still in a teacher shortage, even though here in the state of Washington, I know other states are dealing with the same thing. We are downsizing a lot due to lower enrollment and other issues here in the state, and we're still in a teacher shortage. And I think one of those things, as I teach this class over at Whitworth, and we haven't had a full cohort now in 3 years. Like, we can't even get people into the system. Are you seeing this? Is there anything that you guys are focused on, or anything that you guys can point to say, like, this is a problem? And how do we get young people to say, you know what, teaching is a profession that you can go into? And do you think part of it is the cultural stereotype of education?
Wow, I think you just asked. There's enough meat on those bones to have a whole other show. So in trying to answer those really great big idea questions succinctly, I think there's a number of things at play. Education's become really difficult for political polarity. We've got some people out there who are pretty well empowered to behave poorly. And when you're in a service-oriented position and are treated poorly by a chunk of your constituents because they feel emboldened to do that, right now, I think it doesn't not necessarily make it an incentivizing profession, although salaries are pretty good now, finally, in the state of Washington. Yeah. I think that's been a barrier. Gosh, where else would I go? On top of that, I think we've not thought well, and a lot of this is on us, I think, in public education, and I think it's on the public school districts, and on, when you think about it at the state level, there's some policy things that I believe could happen. We should be recruiting first generation to college students into the education profession. We know that if you're a first generation to college students, you've got a college student, you've got a much better chance of persisting through college if you're going within 30 miles of your hometown for a whole variety of economic reasons, really primarily. And we also know that students respond best to adults in the teaching profession who look like them. So I think the answer really lies in the advocacy of the neighborhood elementary school and in recruiting our best and brightest first generation to college students who want to come and invest in the community that they live in, who already have relationships with, people doing commerce in those neighborhoods. They're related to folks in those neighborhoods. They've got a cachet that you can't have, for example, if you come from, if you're a 22, 23-year-old, you come from, let's say, the Lake Washington area of Western Washington, you land in Pasco School District. There's a lot of culture shock there. It takes a long time to build up any sort of cachet inside of that, micro neighborhood. And then oftentimes people aren't really comfortable. So you see a lot of turnover. Like, I want to go back to where I have context, which isn't anything you can blame anyone for. So I think there are a lot of things that we could do in terms of really igniting that passion inside of our system with the students that we have right now that would make the ultimate difference. I've written a white paper on it, not getting as many people to read it as I wish they would.
Well, you send that white paper to me. We'll definitely link to it in the show notes for sure. Because it's something that I'm noticing there is burnout. I mean, the burnout is real right now in education for sure. And I think to your point, we see high school kids are seeing their teachers burn out. And I can see a ton of high school kids saying, oh, why would I want to do that job? Like, look at these teachers. They're stressed out all the time. They're like, this doesn't look fun. Right. And I think there's just I think we've got to get on the other side of this. Otherwise, we're going to have to figure something out. And you're right. I think one of the things I love about the United States is it's so diverse that here in the state of Washington, I would say, to your point, pay isn't an issue here, although it is in other states, right? Like that is some, and so every state's got their unique differences. But I think overall across this nation, we could look at this idea of it's not, to your point, it's not fun to be a teacher right now. And I think we're having a hard time recruiting the next generation of teachers to stick it out and stay with us.
I think it's never been a harder time to be a teacher, principal, or a superintendent. And given that that is the reality, it's what everybody's reporting. It crosses districts and diverse elements within our state. That basic fact is a barrier to pipeline for sure.
Yeah. If any of these sound like your school or things that you're dealing with, you're going to want to reach out to the Center for Educational Effectiveness. Eric and his team over there are doing incredible work. Thank you for being on the podcast, sharing a little bit about what you do. I think this idea, we know how much school culture plays into the effectiveness of teaching. It's very well documented that it's a big part of it. And I love that that's what you guys focus on. And that's what you're seeing Outlier schools do well. Again, I will link to the research in the show notes as well around the research that shows these Outlier schools and what that does. And you can dig into that more yourself. Eric, as we get ready to wrap this up, if people did want to reach out and learn more, where's the best place for them to go?
If you want to reach out to me personally, I'm out there on all the old person social media handles. So I'm pretty easy to find on the platform formerly known as Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn. You can email us directly at info@effectiveness.org. Website is also effectiveness.org. Relatively easy to navigate. Those are probably the easiest ways to get in touch with us. And then I have a funny spelling in the Eric. My email is eric@effectiveness.org.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Appreciate you being here. Thank you for sharing your knowledge and continuing to doing the work that you do to make education better for all of us.
Hey, thanks for the opportunity, Jeff. And again, just a quick shout out to Jeff's appearance on our podcast. He has an awful lot to say there about AI. I know he gave me a lot to think about, so hope you check out that episode as well. And it was a privilege to be on your show. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you. Hey there, dedicated listener. If you've made it this far, we know you're passionate about shifting the way education works. And Tricia and I appreciate you. If you loved what you heard today, we'd be so grateful if you could take a moment to rate and review Shifting Schools wherever you listen to podcasts. Those ratings help us reach even more educators just like you. And if you know someone who could benefit from these conversations, please share this episode with them. Just one person. Think of the impact we can make together. Don't forget to sign up for our newsletter for even more great content. And if you haven't already, join us at Camp Shifting Schools, where the conversations keep going long after the podcasts end. Thank you for being a part of this journey, and thank you for being part of Shifting Schools.